So this is the RONA meeting. We're meeting with the city staff is presenting the master plan for the Sealy Park. And Joe, I lost Joe on the screen. Where'd Joe go? There you are. And Joe DeVito is going to be presenting the presentation.
Hi, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time this evening. I'd like to thank Raymond, and he's part of the deputy director, Leo and Mary Beth, who's part of the team as well, and my supervisor, Jason, as well, for attending, and Giselle as well. So all part of the city staff that have been part of this wonderful process. So thank you. I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting and share my presentation. Okay, can everyone see my my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Also attending as part of the developers as well is the Hanover Company, Scott Udell, Kevin Sanders, Zach Anderson, and Tyson Gaspard, and along with myself. So I'll move along to the next slide. Just rules of contact for all presentations that we do. The Parks and Rec department is all participants shall be respectful and courteous. Unruly or disrespectful behavior or off-topic comments warrants removal. And public comment begins after the presentation is finished. So thank you, appreciate that. I think everyone's kind of knows where we're at. The project location, it's along Sealy and Montague, and with the mixed-use residential development for the future park along Sealy. So the Montague Sealy project is a 22-acre site with residential and approximately 19,000 square feet of retail space and 0.25 gross acres for a new park. Some historical contents. There's the Briggs Farm parcel, the Sealy Farm, and the Sakawe Farm as well. So kind of the master plan process is in park design. We have meetings with conceptual designs informed by public input, which we had already, I think 1 or 2 meetings prior. Then we went to Parks and Rec Commission, and in between that time, we decided that we needed to have an additional meeting. That's why we're meeting today. So, and then we move along to the final approval from City Council, and then those concepts from the master plan are translated into construction documents and moving along into construction, and then eventually open to the public. And then here's my contact information if you do need it. Just kind of give you what's around in the area. It's Irish Shank Park, and there's River Oaks as well. So kind of geographically understand where we're coming from. So next is kind of the conceptual first renderings, and if Tyson's here, is he available?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, can I pass it along to you for?
Go on.
Yes, yes, sure.
Okay. And just to introduce yourself as well. So.
Okay, I'm Tyson Gaspard. I am a landscape architect for the Hanover Company. So I've been involved with this project kind of from the beginning, and we've done a few iterations of the design. And so we'll look at a couple of the early concepts, and then the final one that we've landed on, the final concept that we've landed on for now. So option A, and then we'll look at option B in a second. We're earlier on in the process, the beginning of 2023. And in 2022, we got some input from the city, and then some survey responses from residents, some of which may be on this call now. And so filtering that information, we had the criteria for the content of the park, the different pieces that we wanted to incorporate, and we did a couple of iterations that were really focusing on form and how to fit those different amenities into the space. And so this first concept, you can see the forms are a little softer. They're a lot more circuitous in their design, but a lot of the features really stay the same. And so the Great Lawn was one of the things we really wanted to include, and I think that there was a lot of support for, because we want it to be multifunctional. We don't want to over program the uses of the space, and so this is this is given the largest square footage because we think it will be usable to the largest amount of people. So it can be, a place for just passive recreation to sit and relax, or it can be a place where, impromptu games happen, sporting events, or just, young kids to utilize the open space, recognizing that we'll be putting in a large number of residents around the perimeter of this space that aren't going to have yards and won't have large open space in their homes. This becomes an extension of that and available to them. And then I think similar to that, probably the second largest amount of space is dedicated to pets. And so a very high percentage of the residents will be bringing pets, and need a place for them to exercise the pets, but then also, a sanitary place where they can use the restroom and waste can be disposed. And so we want to provide that amenity and make sure that it's accessible and easy for the residents. There's a playground that's included in both designs. Again, sort of recognizing that there are families in the area and just wanting the park to be usable to all the various user types. And then there's a couple of sort of entry plazas that we'll get to. They go through some iterations in the designs and move around a little bit. And then just some remaining green space that again is flexible. They each have a pollinator garden, so there's components of local vegetation, and we're storing a little bit of water on the site and using those plants. So Joe, I think we can go ahead and go to option B. So again, a lot of the same pieces in this, but different forms that we were using. This one's obviously a lot more linear. In both designs, we're very focused on how we're making all the connections to the adjacent properties, the adjacent buildings and their entry points, and then how you're circulating through it. One of the big differences in this design beyond just the form, though, was the introduction of the sport courts. And so in these options, we wanted to get responses. And as we got our responses from these two options, the forms of option A were preferred, but the sport court that was shown in option B got a lot of interest. And so that's one of the main things that we took out of this space and tried to incorporate it into the final design. And you can see in this one, the open lawn lost a little bit of square footage. It was smaller and less prominent. And I think the reaction was that the open lawn again wanted to be a larger feature in the park than what happened in this design. The things that did come out of this option were the entry plazas or the entry portals being in the southeast corner, or the southwest corner and the northeast corner. Those were a lot more logical just because of where people are coming in. We think a lot of the neighborhood is probably going to come in through the southwest corner where the historical interpretation area lands into that entry plaza or that entry portal. And then there's the most concentration of new residents in 3 of these buildings in that opposite corner. And so we've tried to gather them into those 2 spaces, and that ends up in the final design. The other pieces, the dog park, the play area, that lawn, and then this fitness component, they all end up in the final iteration. And so if we want to go ahead and look at the final design, so this one is a little bit of a merger of some of the amenity or feature content from option B, but the forms of option A that were preferred. And then some other things that you can maybe note. The play area grew a little bit, so it got a little bit more prominence in this design. And then the sport courts were reduced to 1 so that their footprint didn't take up so much space, but they're still there. And it's actually a double, so it's got 2 pickleball courts. So it's one of the square footage we were showing in that previous option B, but it's still 2 pickleball courts there. So this design, I think in terms of, it does a lot of things for us. So in terms of uses, it has the uses that we saw the most interest from. We were able to incorporate the sport court. We maintained
Why
that.
are you still here, Robert?
I didn't hear that, but we retained that great lawn and gave it a greater prominence. There is the fitness area that's adjacent to that great lawn. And so I think, fitness would again be for people of all ages, but then that great lawn can be an extension of that, where maybe yoga or fitness classes can happen in the lawn, or if you've got kids that are out playing or running on the lawn, the fitness is sort of intentionally adjacent to that or located next to that. The entry plazas that I mentioned before, I'll start with the one in the northeast corner. So there are two direct crosswalks that are coming from two of the multifamily buildings, and there's a third multifamily building that is kind of catty corner there, again in a little bit further northwest. And so there's a lot of residential potential users that will congregate into this spot. So we've created sort of a visually interesting plaza that has a lot of casual seating in there, where people could come out, and there's it's just gathering or social space. There is some it's a little bit of game tables in that area, so it's just typical furniture, but it has a checkers or sketcher or chessboard kind of engraved into the top. That's again something schematic, but something we think we'll see in the final design, and at least it speaks to maybe some of the use for that space. And then in the opposite corner, where maybe some more of the neighbors would be coming in, is the historical interpretation area. So in this space, we're doing two things. We do want to draw people into the park, make a known entry portal for it, but then we're also doing some education on what was there before, what the site previously was, and the significance of the space and the history of it. And then beyond that, some of this stuff is self-explanatory or has a lot, lots of developing to be done. But the play area would be, again, for families or younger kids from, aging from toddler up to high teens, 12, 13, 14-year-olds will have components that that are useful for each of those, or that kind of play to each of those age groups or demographics. There is a shade structure adjacent to the playground so that it could be, parents can sit there and observe, obviously. So that's sort of an anchor or feature there. And it again is intentionally adjacent to the Great Lawn too, so that there's some dual purpose in that. And then the dog park is divided into large dog and small dog. One, because we did dedicate a pretty good amount of space to it. And then also because for safety reasons, that we found there are some differences between the way large dogs and small dogs play and interact. And so we have provided separate fencing for them, but visually it will sort of read as one large space there. I think that's a good overall. I can answer questions, or Joe, if you have anything else you want me to point out specifically, I certainly can, but I think that's a good high level of what's going on in the park.
Yeah, and I was just gonna add, show a few images, kind of they're not gonna be exactly what you see in here, but kind of get a visual idea of some of the things that we were looking at throughout the park. So site furnishings, some tree wells with planters in it for seating, and then just some play equipment, as Tyson touched upon as well, kind of challenging aspects for the play equipment, and some seating throughout. I think there's one more slide. And yeah, just kind of fitness areas, and then look into some alternative the dog park features and some additional items that we're going to look into throughout the park. I think that's it. Some of the images, and then we'll go ahead and open it up to any questions. That kind of concludes our presentation for tonight.
Well, thank you. Does anyone have any questions, or is there anything they would like to see? Or I think everyone's been muted, so if you need to unmute yourself.
I like the last plan because it's got the pickleball and yes, that one. I like that. I hope that you put a lot of benches around the lawn, the Great Lawn. And the fitness area, that looks good also. You have park course. Park course is very good. It was fun years ago when I I did the park course in our neighborhood. So, but anyway, I can see that you have that, and it would be nice if you could maybe add a bocce ball court. We'd like this park to be very active because ours Chan, which is next door, it's very passive.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of curious, what's the percentage of the large and small dog park? Is that maybe half an acre between the two?
I think I can't remember the specifics.
Joe, look on the previous two options. I think it was actually called out.
Yeah,
So this isn't exact, but it gives you a pretty good idea of where they are.
Yeah,
0.4.
yeah. Oh, okay. This is also nice. It has the sports court and the fitness lawn. So the small and large dog park. It's very nice. We need, like I said, lots of seating because people just like to go and just sit and maybe read. So you need a lot of benches.
You're right. Oh, okay. I thought you
thank you for that comment.
Mute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have anything else they want to add or say or input?
Mike, you have anything?
Yeah, I actually have a question, kind of a more logistical thing, and this could be either for the developer, designer, or probably more the city. About a month or so ago, there was the whole issue of the parks fee, and I think what got requested by City Council was that there be a discussion of maybe reducing the parks fee citywide. And I think that's being actively looked at. One of the concerns at the time was if there was a citywide decision to reduce the park fee, that it might impact this park. I was wondering if anybody could give any insight as to what the current status of that situation is.
I think I'd have to probably defer to Raymond on that.
Sure. So that is something that we are looking at based on council direction, exploring different scenarios for the park fee citywide, and that if that goes into effect, may or may not impact this park. It really depends when that comes back to council. And so nothing has been decided yet. It's just we're just basically exploring different options.
So do you know when you're expected to go back to council?
At this point, I don't.
Okay. Want to let you know that when that original issue arose, there were multiple of us who reached out to various parts of the government, city government, including our councilmen, to say that we were concerned about the potential impact on the current parks that are being proposed, both here and the one down on Cisco. So just wanted to say that there's community support for these parks not being impacted by any decision that the city makes about the park fee.
I do know that developer is eager to get this whole project completed, so I know that that's a priority for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also an issue for the Cisco park. Is there a park? No, there's no park at Cisco. My apology. That's all I had, Jean.
Okay.
Anyone else want to add?
yeah, I don't know if you can hear me. This is Bob Jackson.
We can hear you.
If somebody came to the park with a car, where would you park? On Sealy?
There is parking along the perimeter on two of the sides, on the north and the west side. If you can see that there's head-in parking. And then
Yes, I'm sorry. I misunderstood what those spaces were.
yeah, so
Okay, so that's the answer to the question.
Mhm.
You
And then-
park on parking spaces which are provided.
I don't know, Joe or Raymond. I think currently there is, street parking along Sealy. I don't know if that will remain, but that could potentially be option also.
Well, it's usually covered with big sand trucks, so it's not very easy to park on Sealy.
Well, this is Scott Udall. I hope the sand trucks won't be there when this project's completed, but I
Don't
do
we
not believe
all?
along the stretch in front of the park there will be any parking on Sealy. There will be, yeah, for most of this project's frontage on Sealy, there is no surface parking. There's going to be a new expanded bike path in its stead along Sealy.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, because we're having issues right now.
Any other comments? Anything anyone wants to see or wish the park had or anything else? We do have a list of things that people have said to us.
Hey, Gene, it's not associated with the park, but I'd be interested in finding out about the overall, in regards to the overall project, whether there's any thoughts about the traffic, changing the size of Sealy. I know it was supposed to go to 4 lanes, based on the fact that there's no stoplight at Sealy and Montague anymore. So but that's not for this meeting, but that is something that I think we should be taking a look at.
I agree with you there. Scott, have you talked to the construction people as to how their trucks will be coming in and out onto your site?
Yes, hi Gene, and sorry, I turned off my camera because for some reason on Zoom it's a 10-second delay. So
Okay, no
it's
problem.
easier if it's just staring at my name.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we discussed at the last meeting, we do intend to have that discussion with our construction team when we get to that phase of the project. As many of you may know, the project was approved last night, so that was step one as it relates to the entitlements. That now shifts this entire operation more into preparing for construction, and once we and that's when they start working on the construction logistics plan. And as promised, we'll be working with them on that, and then coming back to RONA prior to us breaking ground on anything to speak with you all about the proposed construction routing.
Okay, that's great.
Okay.
That's really good. So,
So I have some questions about the parks. So we had one person say that what they would like to see is inclusive, all-inclusive play equipment for the children. And that it would be more, I mean, I know this is conceptual and we're just looking at an aerial of where spaces would go, but we would like to see in that area something that's more imaginative and not so traditional. I get the idea of the Great Lawn being versatile, but it seems that in our neighborhood, the Great Lawn ends up being another dog park. We have North Park, we have River Oaks Park, we have the park at the end of River Oaks, like Riverview Park.
yeah.
A lot of these open spaces, they don't get used as you possibly imagine them to be used. I don't know if it would help to
Break it up.
make a marker or maybe somehow break up the lawn a little bit so that it's not just one big piece of sod. The lawns end up turning into having crabgrass and holes, and they don't get taken care of very well. I guess I like the idea. We've all spoken about a more active park, and it just seems to me that that's a lot of lawn that ends up failing after a while. I mean, if you look at all the parks in our neighborhood, none of the lawns look good. And that goes, like I said, all the way up First Street, not just Riverview, but North Park and our River Oaks Park that we all like. And even the area of Irish Chang, it's because there's so much vegetation, it's a hard park to maintain. The Irish Chang Park has not been kept up very well. And so I think that for me, looking at the Great Lawn, it seems like in 5 or even, you know,
Oh, yeah.
6 years or whatever, it's just not going to be this imagined great lawn that people can go and play soccer or volleyball or whatever, because it doesn't stay flat. It doesn't, whatever. The lawn just doesn't hold up over time. And I think that, you know, my concern is, given that the parks never has enough money, how the park is going to fare down the line. So when I see something like the historical interpretation area, I worry that whatever you put up that's going to tell the story, that with the sun beating down on it, is going to be faded in 5 or 6 years, and nobody will be able to read what's there. Or, you know, it won't weather very well is my concern. I think it would be nice to have maybe some little bits of information spread throughout the park, so that people aren't just in one area for the history, but anywhere they are, maybe there's a little bit of fact, you know, something that tells them about not just, you know, the this is your pickleball court, but you know, in the pollinator garden, maybe if you're talking about pollination, talk about how important it was for, you know, the orchards, or in the plaza where people were sitting, maybe talk about what, you know, people did on a picnic 150 years ago or whatever, you know, just something that spreads the history through the park. I know there's been an ask that there be more than 2 pickleball courts, and of course the bocce ball, but I just worry about that great lawn, and I worry about how the park is going to look in 10 years after it's built. And I know this park won't be built for another 2 or 3 years, so I would like the Parks Department to take that into consideration and be realistic about how well that great lawn's gonna look after. And the reason I bring up the River Oaks Park is because the River Oaks Park gets extra money from Irvine to help maintain it. And even with that extra money coming in every year to give it you know, extra help, that lawn does not look good. And I know that when it was first there, people set up a volleyball area. Nobody plays in the grass anymore. The dogs took it over, that's one. But the grass is terrible. The grass does not look good. So just, you know, keep that in mind.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry, that's a problem we talked about all the way along with all of these parks. Park maintenance is quite an expensive thing to be done properly. And, you know, it never seems to be properly addressed. And this is a very complex little park. And I think maintenance could be a real problem. And you're right about the lawns. Lawns need a lot of taking care of. And, you know, it's been a perennial problem. And I think you've made the point well that, you know, even that River Oaks Park is, with its extra inflow of cash, is suffering just plain from the fact that maintenance is expensive. And I think every gardener realizes that, right? You don't really prepare to put a lot of time in on your garden, or you're going to grow as weeds.
This is Scott Udall, and thanks for those comments. There's a lot of good comments there, and I'm sure Joe in the Parks Department is taking them down. Just a couple of I guess, additional thoughts, but some related to the Great Lawn and worth mentioning. You know, one is, regardless, it's a point of clarification is what's not shown on this Great Lawn is there is a shade structure where the Great Lawn meets the historical interpretation area that has been added, and that doesn't offset the comment about what to do with the lawn, but there is an intent to have a focal area, you know, within the Great Lawn. But your points about maintenance, and I think, you know, are good points to make. I think maintenance is going to apply no matter what the programming is. I think in some ways, you know, the Great Lawns have, you know, different, you know, maintenance responsibilities than, you know, additional pickleball courts or whatever the case may be. So I think globally, programming for the park. Obviously, we've been working closely with Parks and their maintenance team as well to thoughtfully program this park in a way that the maintenance, burden, for lack of a better term, can be handled. I also really like the idea of historical cues throughout the park. PRC has, already mentioned they want to see elements become more historical in this park. Furthermore, there was council direction to continue to work with the park on historical elements. So, I think you can have a plaza that celebrates the legacy of this land and the family who farmed it, but still, especially if the park is indeed named after H.E. Edward Sakawe, that there can be other cues and elements throughout the park that take you back to that history. And I think it's a good statement and a good goal as the design progresses. Finally, I just want to point out for those of you who may not have seen last night's council meeting, there was council direction for the team and the development team, including myself and Hanover and the Parks Department to work, continue thoughtfully working at ways to relocate the existing Sakawe house on site, including potentially into this park. And we just want to daylight that as we are here, speaking with you about park design and introduce that as, a potential, this is obviously direction from last night, so we don't have any renderings showing this, but just know that is another element that is out there that in the coming days and weeks we'll be sitting down with the Parks Department, to speak further about that option. So
this is Mike Bertram. I hate to interrupt, but I'm not sure people are aware that there was a fire on the site in the last several days.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be one or more buildings damaged. I haven't personally inspected, but the fire was pretty widespread.
It was, and Michael, I've walked the site since the fire occurred with city staff and the historical preservation officer, so I can just give you my observations if people are curious.
That'd be great. We're all kind of curious down here.
Yeah, no, I would say that the fire did impact kind of the back 3 acres of the site. It caused some damage to 2 of the structures. Fortunately, it did not, it did not completely damage either of the 2 structures. And fortunately, the Sakawe house was not one of the structures that was damaged by the fire. There was an old barn that the fire was near, and took some superficial damage, and the fire department, had to get into the barn to just, wet it down and make sure that the fire did not spread within that structure. And then there was a small carriage house that did, took a little bit of heavier damage to, I would say about, 20% of that 1-story structure. The rest of the structures were not touched. But with that said, the fire did get dangerously close to other structures. But, thankfully, the efforts of the San Jose Fire Department were able to contain the fire and prevent it from damaging, further, property or people for that matter.
Really appreciate that information. Thank you very much.
Sure.
If you use the farmhouse, would you be using it like I'm thinking of the one that's coming to the mind right now that's been used in a park-like setting is the one in Los Altos, the History Museum area. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Would the house become a structure people look at, or would you try to have it like a functioning space?
Can I just interject before we kind of start discussing different ideas for the house? So yeah, so council did make a request that staff, along with the developer, kind of explore if we can preserve the house and if the house can be located within the park, but also discussed if we could also locate the house at History San Jose. So we're kind of going to look at a bunch of different options and also look at different cost analysis about how would we make that possible in different scenarios.
Okay.
And you know, the pros and cons, and come up with different options and scenarios to see if either of those options can be accomplished, or even if a third alternative can be proposed. So, but the idea is to preserve the house in some way. It may or may not be at the park, but we just have to kind of look at what are the pros and cons of placing it at the park, and if it makes sense financially as well.
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up on that, just from the direction of the council, the idea would be presumably to make the house be an accessible historic, whether it's a museum or exhibit of some kind, probably partnering with History San Jose as operator, whichever location it's in, so that they could allow access. But there's a lot of steps that would have to happen for that to be possible.
Go ahead.
Scott, this is Jean. Do you know what caused the fire?
Hi, Gene. I do not know.
We have a lot.
I haven't spoken to anyone at the fire department. I was just I walked it with city staff, but beyond that, I don't have any knowledge.
I just to let you know, we do have a lot of fire along the berm. We had like 3 major ones last year. The year before, I think we had like 2. So was very surprised to see that your site was involved in some kind of a fire. So yeah, we're really concerned about anything along the berm that needs to be cleaned up, and to keep the fire down. So anyway,
I understood. We share your concern.
Any other comments? Anybody have anything they want to say?
Thank you for your
Mrs.
comments.
Bob
I appreciate
Jackson,
it.
Can I just ask you one
Yeah.
quick question?
okay.
And it's on the very first chart, we talked briefly about a restroom. The restrooms will be here somewhere,
Right.
and do you know where?
There
No,
won't
but
be any
it's not
restaurant.
distinctly marked, and there are lots of little icons there I don't recognize, so I just wondered.
No, there's no proposed restrooms on site.
There aren't.
No,
Why not?
Yeah.
it's based
I
on
mean,
a
particularly with little kids. Anybody has little kids, okay, they never want to go when they leave the house, but as soon as they get to the destination, they can't wait.
So typically at neighborhood parks, we don't provide restrooms because it's just for the neighborhood. And so you could basically, neighborhood parks are in walking distance of the house, of your house.
There's
so you
one on River Oaks Parkway.
Yeah, so
And
as a
River Oaks
standard,
Park.
we don't provide them at neighborhood parks. We do at community parks, or parks with large community facilities like sports complexes and things like that. But so neighborhood parks, it's just part of our standards that we don't provide restrooms.
But didn't you speak on the first chart about providing them? How could I have missed that? Or I mean, misinterpreted what you said.
We probably took in everyone's input, but we also have to kind of look at our internal standards.
Well, that's not a very good standard. If you've got lots of little kids who are playing around, you need a restroom.
Yeah.
Life's like that.
Well, well, obviously we're taking your input, and if you'd like, we can get back to you.
Yeah, if you mentioned, if it's a sports complex, I mean, if you have pickleball courts and you have like some sort of sports activity, wouldn't that lean in towards having a restroom?
Yeah, people will be drinking and, they may have a picnic. So where do they go?
Well, again, it's a neighborhood park, right? It's supposed to serve just the residents of the area within a 10-minute walk. And so the idea here is with neighborhood parks, you could basically just walk back home to use the restroom if you needed to.
Raymond,
Say-
Raymond, people, it will not be a neighborhood park. You're going to have other people from other areas come in and they will want to play the pickleball. You do the pickleball or the park course. You have to have a bathroom. Now, I know that it's only 2.5 acres. River Oaks is 5 acres. And I don't know about Riverview if they have a bathroom down there, but that's a 5 acre also. But if this is going to be a very active park, then there has to be some place where people need to relieve themselves. And so, it's you're just going to have to find a place. That's all it's to it. We're going to have other people from other areas come in. We have a lot of people from out of the area playing on the River Oaks Park. And so I'm just, unless you don't want anyone to use the bathroom, then nobody will come. And it
Well,
will
I'm afraid if you have children's play area, you need a bathroom because of the problem with small children. I mean, they just can't wait. Anybody has small children knows that.
Well, this is an ongoing issue at different neighborhood parks that don't have restrooms. But it's basically the way the city has set up our, the standards. And it's very similar to other cities that have similar standards where they have neighborhood parks, community parks, and regional parks. And both regional parks and community parks typically have restrooms. And the neighborhood parks, because they're serving the neighborhood and the residents around it, they're the ones that don't typically have restrooms, right? So, and I think with any city, you just have a lot of interest in different types of amenities, but we have to be selective in what we prioritize, right, in any type of master plan, because it's just so difficult to fund and then to upkeep and maintain. And so these are some of the pros and cons and the compromises that we have to make.
And the two most recent neighborhood parks that were built in District 4, Commodore Park, and then the ones that are opening later this month over by the flea market. There's about 6 acres there of park. They don't have restrooms in them. The long time discussion has been the cost of maintaining and keeping clean restrooms versus the proximity that people come to use the park, and the decision, sort of the city standard, has been not to do that because of the difficulty keeping it clean, but not just that, the difficulty of keeping people from living in the restrooms and using them for other things. It just becomes a really difficult thing for neighborhood parks to maintain and manage.
Yeah.
Will there be public restrooms on the Hanover property where, there's retail and such?
Step one would be, when the retail is leased, they would, there would be, I imagine, depending on what retail use ultimately goes in there, say like a restaurant and the size of those spaces, then there would be restrooms for customers, whether or not they'd be open to the broader public, really, kind of be up to that retail tenant.
Okay. I live right across the street from the Alon Apartments, and their retail area has a public restroom, and they have, I think, 3 little restaurants or whatever, but the restaurants don't typically let people off the street use a bathroom.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you guys. Is there any other additional comments at this time?
So,
So,
Scott,
I think you ought to take this one seriously. I understand the problems, but that's life with a park.
So Scott, I want to verify this will be a turnkey park delivered to the city, right?
Yes.
And will you be maybe supporting the city with some funds from your company to maintain the park for so many years?
There's an obligation, Gene, when we turn over the park to a warranty period where we are required to maintain it and fix any issues. We have not had any discussions with the Parks Department about
Okay.
you know.
And one other question, my last question is, can you give us a timeline as to when to walk us through the steps to when you will be building the townhomes and the apartments? And so can you, in the park, can you give us a timeline, please?
Certainly, I'll do it verbally. I think we had a more of a slide that we, and if we can always send you that slide as well, Gene, that we
Okay.
presented to you. So Kevin, let's do, we can work on that tomorrow, and then you can distribute it to the group.
Yeah, that'd be great.
yes, like all development schedules, it's subject to change, but it represents our best estimate as to how things will unfold. We expect to break ground on the site itself the first quarter of next year, likely the month of February is what we're targeting, February of 2025. There is a decent amount of grading and site work that needs to take place. Then we would expect in summer of next year for vertical construction to start both on the townhomes as well as what we're calling Building A, which is the first building on the corner of Montague and Sealy, as well as the affordable building, which is located immediately north of Building A. Sorry, I don't have the benefit of a site plan here while describing this. But I think to answer your question, Gene, consider 2025 basically three projects starting in the summer of 25 vertically, which is the townhomes, the first Hanover building, as well as the affordable building developed by the Pacific companies. And then in following years, call it summer of 2026, the second Hanover multifamily building, and then summer of 2027, the third Hanover multifamily building. And where does and so where the park fits in with all of that is that we would expect to break ground on the park roughly, per the current schedule, we would probably start the park roughly 2 years after starting Building A. So that'd be summer of 27. The reason for that is that, as you could probably imagine, there's a lot of construction staging that happens with a project of this size. And so it's almost impossible to build the park while we're building all these other projects. But the goal would be to kind of start the park as residents are moving in. The park construction itself can take 6 to 9 months, but that's the rough game plan right now.
Okay, sounds great. Yeah, we'd be glad to have something over there. And we do welcome you to our neighborhood, that's for sure.
Thank you very much. You've been very welcomed, and we appreciate that.
That's great. So anybody have any other questions before I close out?
Thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate your guys' time to speak with you guys. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.